They used my inheritance to buy my brother a Ferrari. Part 4. Chapter 19, The Verdict. It all came down to this. Weeks of court. Months of prep. Years of betrayal. And now we were here, waiting for one woman with a gavel to decide whether everything I had been through would finally matter. The courtroom was packed. Even the back benches were full. Some familiar faces from town, people who once whispered behind my back, now showed up pretending to just be curious. It was the biggest case in the county in years, and not because of the legal complexity. Because it was personal. A daughter versus her parents. A truth versus a well-curated lie. Keating and I arrived early. He was calm, unreadable as always. I was a storm inside a skin. Cold hands. Steady spine. My parents arrived 10 minutes late. My mother wore black, like she was attending my funeral. My father had ditched the smugness entirely. He looked gray, smaller. Ethan dragged himself in wearing sweatpants and a hoodie, no designer logo, no cocky swagger, no sunglasses. Just a walking ghost of a golden boy. No one spoke as the judge entered. No rustling. No whispers. Just air so thick you could chew it. Judge Rowland adjusted her glasses. Her voice was crisp, surgical. After reviewing the evidence presented, including the original trust documentation, witness testimony, digital authorization logs, and corroborating financial records, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. Time stopped. She kept going, her tone level but unforgiving. It is the judgment of this court that the defendants knowingly and willfully misappropriated funds designated exclusively for the plaintiff's benefit. Their actions constitute a clear breach of fiduciary duty and financial abuse. Furthermore, the court acknowledges the emotional distress endured by the plaintiff as a result of prolonged deception and manipulation by those legally and morally bound to protect her. I sat frozen. My heartbeat thundered in my ears, not because I was surprised, but because hearing it said aloud was like breathing air for the first time after drowning. Keating gave me a single, silent nod. The judge wasn't finished. The defendants are hereby ordered to repay the full amount of the misappropriated trust, $223,100.27. Additionally, the court awards damages for emotional distress and legal fees in the amount of $85,000. Total judgment, $308,100.27. Gasps from the gallery. Even my parents' lawyer blinked in disbelief. Rowland closed the folder in front of her. Failure to comply with this ruling will result in seizure of assets and wage garnishment. This is not negotiable. Court is adjourned. The gavel came down. And just like that it was over. My mother crumpled into her seat like her bones had given up. Her hands trembled. Her lips parted, but no words came out. She just shook her head like she could undo the ruling by sheer will. My father sat perfectly still, eyes fixed on the ground. He looked like a man who had just watched the stock market collapse and realized he had caused it. Ethan stood up, muttered something under his breath, and walked out of the courtroom before anyone else moved. Not a word. Not a look. Just retreat. The three of them, so loud, so sure, so cruel, now left in stunned silence. And me? I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I stood. I picked up my folder, thanked the court clerk, and walked out the door without turning back. Because this wasn't a victory lap. It was an exit. An exit from years of servitude. From silence. From being the scapegoat in a family that demanded loyalty but gave none in return. They had stolen my money. But I had taken back my power. Chapter 20, The Collapse. There's a strange kind of quiet after a courtroom verdict. It's not peace. It's the silence of impact, like the seconds after a car crash when the world hasn't caught up to what just happened. But once it does, the consequences start falling like dominoes. The verdict was just the match. The collapse? That was the fire. 2 weeks after the ruling, I got a call from Aunt Celeste. "They're selling the house," she said bluntly. "Or trying to." I didn't say anything at first. She continued, "Their lawyer quit. Your mom called me in tears yesterday saying they didn't know how this happened. They've listed the house. Fast track sale. Price cut. No offers yet." Of course not. The neighborhood had seen the court transcripts. Everyone knew what they'd done. There was no erasing it now. Not from public record. Not from memory. Not from the Zillow listing. I looked up the listing myself later that day. They hadn't even staged the photos. The kitchen looked hollow. The backyard, overgrown. My childhood bedroom, once painted lilac and filled with books, was now stripped to bare beige walls. It didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a consequence. The Ferrari was already gone. Repossessed before the trial even ended, thanks to a lapsed insurance policy and defaulted payments. The dealership hadn't even been surprised when Keating sent over the court documents. They'd seen this before: rich play acting backed by broken bank accounts. It was back on the lot within a week. Online, I saw a new listing. Gently used Ferrari Portofino, one owner. Clean title. Must sell. The irony nearly choked me. The car he flaunted as a symbol of status? Now just another reminder of how fake their wealth and their love had always been. A few days later, I got a message from a former coworker of my dad's. "Did you hear?" it read. "He's been put on administrative leave." Rumors going around HR. Management found out about the lawsuit. Apparently, Keating's court filings, made fully public by law, had circulated through the company like wildfire. Clients didn't like doing business with a man found guilty of financial abuse. And companies? They hate bad press. Last I heard, my dad had been reassigned to a different division: lower pay, no bonuses, no access to sensitive accounts. From middle management to paper pusher. From smug to silent. Then came the call from the bank. Not mine, hers. A former classmate of mine worked in loan processing. She messaged me anonymously. "Your mom tried to take out a personal loan for over $50,000. Denied instantly. Her credit scores tanked. Word is, no lender wants to touch her with this lawsuit attached." That same week, I heard from another source that she tried applying for a part-time job at a boutique spa. She lasted 3 days. Apparently, a customer recognized her from the Ferrari inheritance case. She left halfway through her second shift and never returned. The queen of the family couldn't face the whispers. And the world was finally whispering about her. And then there was Ethan. No more white suits. No more gold chains. No more designer posts on Instagram. He tried pivoting. First to Twitch streaming. Then to selling NFTs. Then a YouTube channel called Family Freedom, where he ranted about toxic siblings and fake court systems. It got 10 views. Half of them were probably from Keating. Eventually, he started driving Uber. Word got around that he was borrowing his roommate's Prius because he couldn't afford to fix his own car. The same boy who once took selfies with champagne flutes now offered breath mints in the back seat of someone else's vehicle. He was no longer the golden boy. He was just another guy with a phone and too many regrets. My parents stopped speaking to Aunt Celeste completely. They blamed her for siding with the enemy. She told me they'd called her a snake and a traitor. But Celeste didn't flinch. "They built a house of lies," she said. "You just walked out the front door?" As for the rest of the family, lines were drawn. Some stayed neutral. Others, cousins, distant relatives, people who once hugged me with fake smiles, quietly reached out with messages like, I always wondered why they treated you like that. I'm sorry I didn't say something sooner. Good for you. But I didn't need their closure. The apology I needed had already arrived. Not in words, but in karma. The kind that doesn't knock once it kicks in the door, opens your drawers, and takes everything back. I didn't throw a party. I didn't celebrate. I got a check, one that will take time to cash in full through asset seizures, repayments, and legal filings. But I also got something more valuable. Freedom. I moved into a quiet apartment across town. Clean walls. My own furniture. My name on the lease. No one telling me what to pay for or how grateful I should be. I still worked. I still hustled. But now, every dollar I earned was mine. And every day, I woke up knowing one thing with crystal clarity. They collapsed under the weight of their own lies. And I rose out of it. Chapter 21, The Begging Begins. It was a Saturday. Warm, clear skies. Birds chirping. One of those peaceful mornings where the world seems to finally let you breathe. I was sitting in my new apartment, small but mine, sipping a cup of cheap coffee and watching sunlight streak across my bookshelf when the knock came. 3 short taps. Hesitant. The kind of knock people use when they are not sure they'll be welcomed. I wasn't expecting anyone. I opened the door. And there they were. My parents. Side by side. Looking like they hadn't slept in days. My father wore an old jacket, the same one he used to wear before the money, before the illusion. My mother looked smaller. No makeup. Red, puffy eyes. She had a manila folder clutched against her chest like a shield. I didn't say a word. Neither did they, not at first. They just stood there on my doorstep, shadows of the people who once looked down on me from their throne of entitlement. Finally, my mom spoke. "Can we come in?" I paused. Leaned against the door frame. "Why?" We want to talk," she said. "Please." I looked them up and down. The last time I'd seen them, they were storming out of court, silent, bitter, defeated. And now, they looked like they'd walked through the wreckage of their own life and found nothing left. I didn't move. "You can talk from there?" My dad cleared his throat. We're in a bad spot." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh." My mother stepped forward. "We lost the house. The car's gone. Your father's job was cut to part-time. We're underwater on every bill. We're not okay." Her voice cracked. Real emotion. Not performance. And still I felt nothing but quiet. She looked up at me, and then said the words that, months ago, I would have sold my soul to hear. "We're sorry." The words hit like a pebble on concrete, loud, but too late. I folded my arms. "For what, exactly?" My dad spoke next. "For not listening. For what we took. For how we treated you. It got out of hand. Out of hand. Like they hadn't deliberately, methodically stolen a 6-figure inheritance and funneled it into their son's ego. Like they hadn't mocked me for standing up for myself. Called me dramatic. Ungrateful. Selfish. I stared at them. Then asked, "What do you want?" They exchanged a glance. And then my mom whispered, "Alone." There it was. The ask. The twist in the story. The same people who said I was entitled now asking for my money. The same people who looked me in the eye and said, "We don't owe you anything," now standing on my doorstep, asking me for help. She started explaining. They needed a loan to cover a security deposit. They were moving into a smaller rental, but it still required first month's rent, last month, and a damage deposit. They'd exhausted their savings. Their credit was shot. No one else would co-sign. You have the money now, my dad said. And it's not a lot. Just a loan. I said nothing. Then my mother added, you're doing well. You have a job. A new place. You won. Won. Like this was a game. Like the hospital stay. The lawsuits. The nights crying over broken promises were some kind of competition. And that's when I realized something. They hadn't changed. They were just desperate. Desperate enough to pretend they cared. Desperate enough to lie. Desperate enough to beg from the same child they'd thrown to the wolves. I stepped inside for a moment, pretending to consider it. When I came back, I was holding a check. Their eyes lit up like fireworks. They reached for it almost hungrily. I let them touch it. Let their fingers feel the edges of the paper. Let hope bloom on their faces. Then I tore it. Clean down the middle. The silence that followed was deafening. My mom gasped. My father's mouth dropped open. I hope, I said, locking eyes with them both, you appreciate this lesson? I took the torn halves and dropped them into their hands. Just like you appreciated my money. And I closed the door. I didn't cry. I didn't shake. I made tea. Sat back down. Watched the sun climb across the room. Because that door? That knock? That plea? It wasn't my responsibility anymore. It was theirs. And for the first time, they were finally forced to face something they never prepared for. Accountability. Chapter 22, The Moment of Power. Power doesn't always come loud. It doesn't always come in the form of revenge or fury or slam-dunk courtroom speeches. Sometimes, power arrives quietly wrapped in stillness, forged in restraint. And sometimes, power is saying no with a smile. After I closed the door in their faces, I didn't pace the floor. I didn't fall into old habits, questioning if I'd gone too far, if I was cruel, if they meant well after all. No. I sat in the quiet. And felt strong. For the first time in years, maybe in my whole life, the people who once held all the cards had been reduced to what they really were, manipulators with no more strings left to pull. They had come back not because they loved me. Not because they regretted what they'd done. But because they had nowhere else to go. And now, standing on the other side of my locked door, was everything they had taught me to be afraid of: guilt, pressure, duty. But I didn't feel guilty. Not anymore. Because this wasn't about revenge. This was about choice. My choice. I sat on the edge of my couch and stared down at the torn check they had tried to take from me. I still had the other half. I left it there on the table as a reminder. That I had every reason to say yes, but I didn't. Because they never once said yes to me when I needed them. Not when I cried myself to sleep working double shifts. Not when I paid their bills while they shopped for Rolexes. Not when I collapsed from exhaustion and they said I should take better care of myself. Not when I was drowning and all they did was hand me stones. And now, they wanted me to throw them a life preserver. But I didn't. I let them tread water in the very sea they poured for themselves. Later that night, I sat on my balcony with a cup of tea, watching the lights of the city blink and glitter like the stars I used to wish on. I thought about all the times I dreamed of getting even, of slamming doors, winning cases, proving them wrong in front of everyone. And yet, the most powerful moment didn't come in a courtroom. It came on my doorstep. When I chose not to save them. When I stood still as they begged and cried and clawed at the past and walked away. That moment wasn't about them anymore. It was about me. It was about everything I had become. I was no longer the daughter they could guilt into silence. No longer the human wallet they could drain with a smile. No longer the servant in a family that called theft love and obedience loyalty. I was the woman who walked through the fire and came out unburned. They say you truly win when you have the chance to destroy someone and don't. But I didn't spare them out of mercy. I left them where they were because that's exactly where they put me when I was down. And because sometimes the only way to make people feel what they've done is to walk away while they beg and not look back. Chapter 23, The Social Media Scandal. I never meant to go viral. All I wanted was closure. I didn't care about attention. I wasn't interested in revenge. I just wanted the truth to be heard, for once, without being spun into a sob story that painted me as the villain in my own life. But apparently, the internet loves a good takedown, especially when it's poetic. It started with a thread. One of my friends, a co-worker from the diner who'd followed the whole case quietly from the sidelines, posted a simple tweet. This girl's family used her six-figure inheritance to buy her brother a Ferrari while she worked 2 jobs to pay their bills. Then gaslit her about it. She took them to court and won. The thread went on to lay out the entire saga in bite-sized, fury-inducing tweets. The trust fund. The lies. The Gucci sneakers. The breakdown. The lawsuit. The Ferrari. The verdict. The begging. Each post ended with a mic drop punchline. She was paying their water bill while they were buying a 3rd Rolex. They told her she was being dramatic. Now they owe her $300,000 plus. They asked for a loan after the trial. She handed them a check and ripped it in half. I saw the post one morning while brushing my teeth. By then, it already had 90,000 likes. By that afternoon, it was trending under #TrustFundAvenger. Then came TikTok. People started making dramatic reenactments with captions like, POV, you're the daughter who worked 2 jobs while your parents gave your inheritance to your brother? Soundtracks ranged from Billie Eilish's You Should See Me in a Crown to Industry Baby by Lil Nas X. Some used audio of me taken from a podcast I'd done shortly after the verdict. I had hesitated to even go on, but the host was thoughtful and had gone viral herself for covering stories of financial abuse. One soundbite in particular exploded. I didn't sue my parents for money. I sued them because they treated my silence like permission. That line hit a nerve. Clips of it started popping up everywhere, layered over slow-motion visuals of courtroom scenes, women throwing off wedding rings, people walking away from toxic relationships. It wasn't just my story anymore. It became a movement. The comments poured in like floodwater. This is straight out of a Netflix drama. I need 8 episodes and a limited series now. Imagine raising a daughter strong enough to survive you and then having to beg her for help. She didn't lose a family. She escaped a cult. Give this woman a sword and a throne? People started tagging me in edits. Artists made digital portraits of me, a crown on my head, a Ferrari burning in the background. Someone even wrote, "Rip to the trust fund. You would have done great things. But justice was served, and your spirit lives on in court documents and petty revenge." I laughed. For the first time, I really laughed. Not out of disbelief. Not out of bitterness. But because it was finally okay to laugh. Let's just say the internet was not kind to them. Within days, internet sleuths found Ethan's now dormant YouTube channel. They flooded the comment section with, "How's Uber treating you, King? Still waiting on that jet license? This man owes his sister a 6-figure apology and a public Instagram Notes app confession?" My mother's Facebook went private within 48 hours. Before that, someone screenshot one of her infamous posts, the one where she'd written, "Sometimes your children turn on you for no reason. God will judge them." Someone replied, "God judged you. It's called civil court. And you lost." I didn't participate in the pile-on. I didn't post anything, didn't comment, didn't even like anything. But I read every word. And for the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in a long time. Validation. A podcast messaged me. Then another. Then a journalist from a major news outlet asked if I'd be open to a profile piece, the portrait of generational betrayal and financial justice. Netflix producers contacted Keating. He emailed me with the subject line, "Want to be played by Zendaya?" I thought he was joking. He wasn't. Nothing was finalized, not yet. But suddenly, the story I had buried in spreadsheets and depositions had become a modern parable. A cautionary tale. A war cry. A mirror held up to thousands of people who had been told, "You're the problem," when really, they were the victims. I didn't ask for any of it. But when the spotlight found me, I didn't flinch. Because the truth, it deserved light. Even if it flickered across phone screens and comment sections and meme threads. Even if it showed up dressed in hashtags. Because the story wasn't about going viral. It was about finally being heard. And being heard, really heard by millions of strangers, after a lifetime of being dismissed by the people who raised you? That's not revenge. That's revolution. Chapter 24, The Redemption Arc, for me, not them. The world had finally heard my story. The internet buzzed with support. Court records were public. People knew the truth. For once, I wasn't the one trying to explain, to defend, to beg for belief. But here's the thing no one tells you about justice. After you get it, the silence feels enormous. The noise dies down. The text's slow. The court gavel falls, and then, it's just you. And the life you're finally free to build. And that's where the real redemption begins. My apartment was still modest, no penthouse, no fancy loft, but I started adding pieces that made it mine. I bought a soft green velvet armchair, something I'd wanted since college but never let myself indulge in. I found a thrift mahogany bookshelf and filled it with the books I used to read as a kid, the ones that made me feel safe when the world didn't. I painted the kitchen a warm, honeyed cream. I bought a hanging plant and named her Gloria because, quite frankly, that plant looked like she'd been through hell and was still thriving. Like me. It wasn't about aesthetics. It was about ownership. I didn't owe this space to anyone. Not my parents. Not a man. Not a roommate. Every square inch was earned the hard way. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in my own story. After the verdict, I quit one of my 2 jobs. Not in dramatic fashion. Just a quiet thank you and a formal resignation. Because now, I could breathe. I didn't have to break myself in half to survive. I took a risk and applied to a nonprofit that advocated for financial abuse survivors, something I'd never have had the bandwidth or energy to pursue before. They called me in for an interview within a week. When the director asked why I wanted to work there, I told the truth. Because I know what it's like to be robbed by the people who claim to love you and to be told you're the crazy one for noticing. I got the job. They didn't even wait a day to offer it. And every day since then, I've walked into an office where people believe survivors. Where stories like mine aren't shocking, they are common. And we're working to make sure they stop being. I started journaling again. Not the spiraling, tear-stained entries I wrote during my lowest points. These were different. They were observations. Little victories. Truths I never knew I was allowed to say. Eventually, I published one of them anonymously on a blog for adult children of narcissistic parents. It went viral within 48 hours. People emailed, DM'd, shared their own stories of betrayal, inheritance theft, manipulation, being the responsible one while their siblings floated through life on lies and favors. I started writing more. And for the first time, my story wasn't just mine. It was ours. I got dozens of requests to appear on shows, but there was one that stood out as small, niche podcast hosted by a woman named Kendra who'd built a community around healing from toxic family dynamics. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't sponsored by luxury brands or big studios. But it was real. Kendra didn't ask me to be sensational. She asked me to be honest. And when I spoke, something shifted. I wasn't performing grief. I was translating survival. I was helping someone else put words to their pain. And that was redemption. Not the kind that ends with swelling music and a sunset, but the kind that frees you. Let's get this straight. I didn't forgive my parents. Not in the tidy, Sunday sermon way people love to romanticize. But I released them. I stopped expecting apologies that would never come. Stopped needing them to hurt like I had. Stopped waiting for them to say, "You were right." Because I already knew I was. And that's the thing about power, it's not about holding someone down. It's about finally standing up and realizing you're not stuck anymore. I planted flowers on my windowsill. I started sleeping 8 hours a night. I bought myself a pair of shoes that fit perfectly, no blisters, no tightness. They were red, bright, bold, unapologetic. Just like me. I met new people, ones who didn't know me as the girl whose parents stole from her, but as the woman who fought back. And when someone asked me at a party, "What's your story?" I didn't flinch. I just smiled and said, "I reclaimed my life." That's the short version. Because the long version was still unfolding. Page by page. Step by step. Without guilt. Without fear. And without needing anyone's permission to be whole. Chapter 25, The Last Word. For most of my life, I never got to finish a sentence. Not really. Any time I spoke up, it was too much. If I cried, I was dramatic. If I asked questions, I was ungrateful. If I dared to point out the obvious, the lies, the unfairness, the manipulation, I was the problem. So I stayed quiet. I paid the bills. I cleaned the messes. I swallowed the truth and told myself silence was love. But silence isn't love. It's just a prison with good lighting. I used to imagine one final confrontation. Me, standing in front of my parents. No yelling. No begging. Just calm truth delivered like a dagger. I used to dream of the moment they'd sit in stunned silence while I said everything I'd been forced to bury. But I don't need that anymore. Because the courtroom spoke. The receipts spoke. My actions spoke. And now, I don't need them to hear me. I'm speaking for me. So this is it. This is my last word. Not to my parents. Not to my brother. Not even to the court. This is for every person who's ever been told they are crazy for noticing abuse that hides behind the mask of family. This is for the ones who stayed silent at dinner tables, biting their tongue while golden children were celebrated for existing. This is for the ones who gave their last $50 to people who wouldn't spit on them if they were on fire. This is for the quiet, overworked, reliable siblings who missed out on their own lives cleaning up someone else's. This is for you. You were never selfish for asking questions. You were never disloyal for protecting yourself. You were never wrong for wanting love to feel safe. You were never the villain for demanding justice. And if no one else ever says it, let me. You were right. Even if they never admit it. Even if they never say sorry. Even if they call you difficult for the rest of your life. You were still right. And the moment you stop needing their permission to heal, that's the moment you win. They used my inheritance to buy my brother a Ferrari. While I worked 2 jobs. Paid their bills. Lost sleep. Missed meals. Buried myself in guilt that didn't belong to me. They gaslit me. Lied to me. Mocked me. And still I stood up. I fought back. I took it to court. And I won. Not just in the legal sense. I won me back. And you can too. Maybe not today. Maybe not cleanly. Maybe not in front of a judge. But healing doesn't need an audience. It just needs a beginning. So if you're reading this, and you've been the quiet one, the difficult one, the black sheep, you're not alone. And you don't have to prove your worth to people who only value what they can take from you. You can walk away. You can fight back. You can tear up the check. And you can write your own. This is mine. The last word. And for once, I don't need anyone's permission to speak.
They lied. They cheated. They betrayed the one person who gave them everything. But guess what? The truth always finds a voice, and here, it screams. If you live for chaos, loyalty gone wrong, and revenge served cold. Like this video. Drop a comment. And hit subscribe, because on Family Drama Unleashed, we don't forgive, and we never forget. Tap that bell, because the next betrayal? It's already on its way.